Alright gamers, we got the role guide part 4, the sequel is here, and we have the role of abuse and verbal assault, or support. Same disclaimer as always, this is not the one and only guide on how to support, it is just my knowledge and advice for playing the role, so take it as you will. With that being said, let's jump straight into the role no one ever wants to play. So what is a support in Smite? Well, a support is the punching bag, frontline, whose job is to mainly protect the backliners. They can dive as well, and they spend laning phase starting in duo lane and transitioning into a pseudo jungle role. So pre-game, you have to worry about quite a lot, but it doesn't really affect your relic choice or anything. You worry about the mid 3v3 and how duo lane is going to start out clear-wise. Relics will usually include Blink, Sprint, Horrific, or Sunder if you have massive balls. And you can get beads if it is a very CC heavy comp and you have no CC immunity in your kit. Alright, so laning phase is quite simple for the start. You'll be starting at purple buff, bead on the boy, and then you decide whether or not to take the alpha harpy. This is really, again, just a preference thing. I usually like to get it, but to each their own. In lane, supports are usually the ones setting the pace for aggression and what's happening. Be wise with your health pots, and good management can keep you in the lane and net you some greedy kills. Don't overextend and get beat up by minions, though they will hurt a lot early on. Now, once you start rotating out, this is where the role gets a little bit more complicated. Rotating out of duo isn't a set in stone time. Some people rotate when they get their boots online and they hit level 5. Some would even rotate out until 10 minutes in. Supports honestly play more like bunglers during the laning phase. You don't always have to rotate to mid either, you can put pressure in solo or get ganks in duo lane. Decide on how much farm you're going to want and base that around if you have a lead or not, or if it's valuable for you to have a lead. I am personally a very greedy support. I want all the farm so I can harass the enemy jungler. Be aware of how much farm you are taking, however. If you need farm and no one wants you in their lane, just don't listen to them. You need farm one way or another, and sometimes the mid laner just has to learn to stop crying and split their farm. Harassing the enemy jungler is very useful if you have a lead. It feels horrible as a jungler to fight a support who is the same level as you. Especially if you have a lead, you can afford to just harass people and slow them down in the bungle. So, a key concept of support that no one can really understand. Not everyone's death is your fault. Yes, the support isn't to blame for every single problem you have. Crazy, I know. If you're at 200 health, you're spamming retreat, and your jungler carry dives in and they die, well, that sucks, they probably shouldn't be there. So many times I've seen a mid laner or a carry whiff a skill shot and they automatically blame me for not adjusting to it. I starbolted someone once and Scylla completely whiffs her ultimate and thinks, oh, that's my fault now. So I'm just like, huh? You done missed it yourself, that's just your fault now. You have to learn to accept that and fix that for next time. That's not me, that's on you. Pretty much in this role, it's one of the few roles where I'd say just kind of block out everyone if they start getting whiny, block out that criticism. No one even wants to play the role in the first place. There's so many times where I've had to trade and be support, and then they complain about how I play support, like they wouldn't even be willing to try it either, so. If you're not an SPL level support, do not feel bad. You're in the minority if you even play the role in the first place. You're the easiest scapegoat, and Smite players have a huge ego problem despite basically being in plat or gold, and they still complain. Alright, team fighting as a support. The general idea for supports is to be a protective boy, but that is not always the case. Diving a support isn't uncommon, especially in this meta. You draft a Kuzumbo or a Hercules to harass the backline and dive. Gotta keep your head on a swivel in this role. You're more or less the commander, even if it doesn't feel like it sometimes. You gotta be positioned in a way to protect your carries, but also get some good CC out there for the setup. You can be the main initiator, especially if you have Blink. Don't overextend or try and make a play that isn't there. It feels great to get support kills and such, but it's not always going to happen, so you don't have to force it or chase kills. Ideally, you don't want to get most of the kills, but a kill is a kill, a pick is a pick, it doesn't really matter who gets it. And be mindful of relic timers. Usually you have the good CC and setup that leads to those kills, so be aware when someone has beats down or something. Different styles of support will position differently. Stay-at-home supports like the Sylvanas are going to be next to the backliners ready to peel people off. Diving boys like the Kuzumbo and initiators will probably end up diving and being in the enemy backline. Good supports are also micromanagers. They do the little stuff like baiting out relics and ults, which is very valuable. A lot of the dirty work you do will not go noticed. Dying every team fight but setting up 3 kills every time is a good support trade. Know when it's worth it to die and be that sacrifice if it's necessary. Objective play is important. You'll be the one tanking objectives most of the time. Get good at learning how to leash them and get good at dropping the objective to stop damage onto it. If you go for a steal, you're probably the best option solely just because your life is more or less throwaway. Not to say that the support's life is less valuable, but it is rather recommended that you die rather than a mid laner or a carry. Alright, sieges are relatively simple both ways on offense and defense. You're there to take damage and be the sponge. There's only minor differences between offense and defense as a support. Don't take too much tower damage though. Tower damage does ramp up the more you stand in it, so you don't want to be dying to that. On offense, don't eat those tower shots, they ramp up and hurt. Be aware that if minions go away and strip backdoor protections and they die but you still take aggro from the Phoenix, backdoor protections will still be gone until you leave. And on defense, you try and keep the enemy team out of the Phoenix, but if you can't, that's not the worst thing to have ever happen. Try and CC people inside of the tower so they can get eaten up by the Phoenix, and let your carries eat anyone inside, make up space for them, let them free cast. So relic usage can vary from support to support. My aggressive relic usage is more akin to a solo laner. I'm usually getting Blink, Horrific, Thorns, Sundered, or some combination of those. If you have defensive relics like Shell and Horrific, though, you have to be smart with them. Stuff like Shell, Horrific, and Frenzy all are timed, so you have to communicate and be aware of what's happening. You can get your relics baited out, and it's only on a limited timer. You don't want to end up wasting your upgraded Shell and then get devoured by the Baka because you popped it way too early. As per usual, builds are quite volatile to change, as always. Supports are quite flexible though, there's a lot of options similar to solo laners. Reinforced shoes are the go-to pretty much almost every time. Some gods like Emoji can go blue boots, and pushing a lead on someone like a Sobek can let you go purple boots if you feel like that's what you want. Thieves isn't as much as a requirement anymore. I actually don't buy it more than I do buy it. Instead, I usually end up going Stone of Binding, second on Guardians, or Sledge on Physicals. If I don't have a lead or it's a late game comp, then I will go Thieves. Prioritize defense that you'll need more. If you're fighting the mid laner a lot, you're going to want an earlier Genjis or an Onis. If you're fighting the solo or carry a lot, go for a Salve or early physical prots. Brywin is a great choice. I buy it on most of the supports I play. Relic Dagger is also good, especially if you have Blink, Frenzy, or Blink Sunder. A little bit of damage isn't too bad either. Magus, Divine, and Reaver are all the best damage choices, and don't be shy, especially if you do have a lead. Bruiser items are all good. E-Staff, Gem of Iso, Voidstone, those are all good, and rounding out your build with a Mantle is always a good choice. So the god types are pretty much split into two styles for support, and one is clearly a little bit more popular. Diving aggressive supports and stay-at-home supports are the two types. You can take a guess on which one is more popular right now, and has been popular for a long while. I think those diving aggressive supports are more effective, but there's nothing wrong with playing a good stay-at-home support. Some meta picks are Yamoja, Hercules, Kuzumbo, Khepri, and Xing Shen. Same as always though, play what you like, but be aware of the meta. Alrighty boys, that wraps it up for the coolest role on the Conquest map, supports. Remember, as always, this is definitely a Bible that you should always follow. Definitely not something that you just interpret and take for what it is and use it to apply to your own gameplay. Intended to just teach the basics and stuff and take what you will. Not everything I say will be something you can take and learn from or be married to. And I'll see you gamers in the next one.